are the leader in religious freedom, and we've got to continue to fight for the families of Oklahoma, to fight for individuals' religious liberty. And that's what we're going to continue to do here in the State Department of Education. I'm honored to be able to represent the parents and to continue to fight for their religious liberties. And it's really unfortunate that we have teachers' unions that are obviously against school choice, obviously against parents' rights, obviously against these religious freedoms. And then you have some elected officials that don't step up and fight for these families. But we're going to continue to do that here. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. Thanks for joining us late on a Thursday here.
Do you not see this as if this, the Supreme Court had allowed this to happen? Would that have not opened up Pandora's box a little bit? I mean, wouldn't that have allowed, say, the Church of Satan to start their own publicly funded charter school if that were the case? And how would you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I just completely disagree. So number one, the Church of Satan, Satanism, that's not a religion, will not be recognized as a religion in Oklahoma. Number two, this school, this process, you have to show certain things in your charter application. So one of the things you have to show is that the community and parents in the area want the school. Their kids would attend the school. The other things that you have to show is a track record of success inside the school system. So that is where a school like St. Isidore was uniquely positioned to say, not only are we wanted by a lot of families, not only do we have a track record of success in some other schools, we literally have a similar apparatus in the private school system that has been successful. So they really, when you look at the criteria for charters, and because, I think to your point, we want high quality charters that parents want that really help raise academic outcomes for kids. So part of that application has been you've got to show that track record for success, and so that helps us be the perfect state to launch something like this where you're not going to have issues like that.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned avenues of possibly changing the state constitution. Obviously, that would take the state legislature to follow through with you. They're sending now to the governor a resolution to disapprove the citizenship rules. The governor on Wednesday said he doesn't think anybody really takes you seriously. Do you think there's an option that the state legislature would even consider something like that?
Look, I'm always going to advocate for the right thing for the people of Oklahoma. And so, look, I think that they should. I think they should look at it. I think that they should at least consider giving this over to the people of Oklahoma to vote on. I think we've got to tackle serious issues. I think that we've got to make sure that we're tackling the big issues. And when you look at an issue like religious freedom, that's about as big of an issue as there is. You look at, back to the foundation of this country. When I look at education, I look forward, I continue to believe we've got to innovate and think outside the box. We have to look at things in a very different view, more holistic view of how do we give more opportunities for kids, how do we bring new models for students, how do we continue to challenge the status quo. I believe this is an avenue we've got to pursue. You've got religious entities, again, the Catholics have done a tremendous job of educating children. In the state of Oklahoma, they have some of the most successful schools here already in the private school realm. Nationally, the same thing. We want to give them an opportunity to open more up in the charter school space. So I believe it's a huge issue. I believe that the legislature, I think it's an option. I'm not saying today that needs to happen tomorrow, but I'm saying all options should be on the table. That's one that we're taking a look at to see if that provides a more clear path to get back to the U.S. Supreme Court. And again, the Supreme Court with this decision has left that opportunity open to say there is a possibility of an approval in the process. It wasn't this dramatic ruling saying in no way they're standing here. So I think in that sense it's encouraging, but again, I think we need to get to work. Families are waiting. Families are wanting these type of opportunities, so we do need to be active.
I just had a quick
yes, sir. Yeah.
detail on that. You mentioned families are waiting. I was curious, how many families actually signed up and enrolled in the school whenever it was set up and then, obviously put on pause?
That's a great question. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. I believe we were looking at 200, I think was roughly about it. Okay, and I know the school expressed that, once this kind of became a bigger issue, they had a lot more folks reach out to the school. So I don't know where that number ended up, but I know that, it was kind of one of those things where as I traveled the state, talked to parents, talked to folks throughout the communities, this really opened up their eyes to, could we have opportunities like this? Could there be other opportunities similar to this? So I think that initial group, and again, we met with the school early on to figure out, well, what happens when the Oklahoma Supreme Court stopped it from moving forward on what their options were. So we tried to make sure they understood the open enrollment, how to transfer to other public schools. Again, they're kind of left out in the cold. So we're going to make sure that they all have those opportunities. But look, I think that this is going to continue to grow. We're going to see that with our school choice tax credit as well. Once you start a program, once people get into it, then you've got word of mouth where people start talking about it. So I anticipate that to continue to grow.
Not to go back to that previous question, but but let's say, I know you talked about how this Catholic school system is a well-established thing, and so that's why there's not really the concern about, say, the Church of Satan, for example.
Sure.
Well, I know we might not have as big a community as people here in Oklahoma, but where I grew up in Texas, the city I lived in, we had a huge Islamic population. There were well-established
Sure.
Islamic schools there. I mean, how would you feel about that if it were a non-Christian religion that were granted to have public funds to run a school?
Well, I mean, again, that scenario you're painting, it wouldn't take place here because we don't have those schools with that track record. So what we've continued to see here in Oklahoma is our charter process has been very clear that these models have to be in place. You've got to be able to meet these criteria. And so again, that's for other states can deal with that. We have done it a certain way here that provides certain pathways to success. And again, this charter school met all of those, so I don't have an issue with this one.
But in supporting the U.S. Supreme Court to allow this to happen here in Oklahoma, if
Sure.
they were to do that, that would allow things to happen in other states. Are you not worried
Sure.
about a precedent that it could set in other states?
No, I'm not. I'm worried about the state of Oklahoma. That's my concern always is what's happening for the folks of Oklahoma. Look, if other people, I would tell everybody to look at our application process. I would say there was a lot of detail that was put into that to make sure that, again, we want high quality charters, but we're not looking to just have a ton of charters if they're low quality. So there was a particular reason for the process. I would tell all states they should look to us. And again, frankly, now a lot of states, some states don't have charter schools. Some states have charter schools that have to go through hoops that frankly sometimes leave me scratching my head. I don't really understand kind of why some of them have the criteria they do. So I would just say, look, Oklahoma is a model here. I would tell those states that they need to look at us and they wouldn't have those type of issues.
I know this is the second or third press conference you've had in the past week. I'm sure you probably saw what the governor said yesterday. He mentioned that nobody takes you seriously. And that's a guy who once endorsed you. I mean, you were his Secretary of Education.
Sure.
He appointed. Do you agree with him that nobody should take you seriously?
Well, I didn't see his comments. I mean, my focus has been improving education for every child. My position, my concern has been the people of the state of Oklahoma. So, when I come out and say that we should cut income taxes now, not in the future, and I say that in the middle of session to try to get something done, because literally everywhere I go, people go, we heard all this about cutting income taxes, but that doesn't sound like cutting income taxes. Literally, in a restaurant, have people come up to me, say things about income tax cuts. I thought it was I saw the commercials on TV, but I heard that's not what's happening. I come out and say that. I come out and say it in session to try to say, guys, let's get back. We can do these things. And again, people want to, attack me or attack that I'm making comments on that. Well, address the issue. The issue is this budget good enough for the people of Oklahoma? I continue to hear all over the state that it's not. That they want to see the cuts now, that they want to see a bigger conversation around eliminating income tax, eliminating property tax. We have other states that are tackling these big issues, and we're saying, we'll cut a quarter of it. I think the people of Oklahoma deserve better, and so yeah, I'm not going to apologize for those statements. I mean, it didn't, I'm not really tracking with what everybody else is saying about me. I would like for the conversation to be around, why can't we eliminate income taxes? Why can't we eliminate property taxes? Why can't we take a comprehensive look at tax reform the way, frankly, some other states are doing? I mean, that's what frustrates me. I see other states having these big conversations, and I see us not having those conversations. So, look, I think the people of Oklahoma deserve it. I think they've demanded it in their last election cycles. So I'm going to continue to advocate for that.
To get back to the news of the day, though, obviously the vote was tied 4-4. One justice who did stay out of that. I mean, what do you think of their voting and everything? Obviously that is a bigger conservative Supreme Court filling. So I just wanted to ask you, what do you think of the voting and stuff? Because obviously, Amy Coney Barrett
Yes.
refused herself.
Well, obviously, I was disappointed when I heard that news, earlier in the year that she wasn't going to be a part of it, because she's been pretty consistent in her rulings on these type of issues. And then, and we don't know, they're not going to show us who voted where, which is frustrating, right? It's frustrating to not be able to kind of read the dissent, to read the opinion, to see what individuals said what. I think that's really frustrating. I will say I'm hopeful in the way that they left the door open. But, yeah, for me it is frustrating because you see conservative justices and we don't know who or the reason why they kind of flipped here on this issue. So, look, that is frustrating. I think a lot of people would be frustrated by that. But, I do think the door continues to be open. So, what we've been looking at today are what are the other ways that we can get this back to the Supreme Court? What are ways that we can continue to lead on religious liberty in Oklahoma? And so that's been our reaction. That's been our approach.
You've spoken a lot about expanding parents' rights, religious education, opt their children out of sort of the new content that is included in
Mhm.
the social studies standards, like religious education, the elections,
Sure.
open stuff. What's your reaction to parents doing that?
Well, so I've got kind of a couple of thoughts. The first one is, I do think it is concerning that parents would opt their kids out of understanding American history. That right there, I am concerned with that because, again, I think that kids need to have an understanding of American history. That's all of it. And we've talked about this a lot. Our kids are going to know what made America exceptional. I believe the left has pushed all that out of schools. You can't talk about the Bible. You can't talk about all of these founders' statements and really have that holistic conversation. But you can talk about all the bad stuff, okay? So what we've said is we've got to go back to a time where we're proud of our core principles. Kids understand them. They understand where they came from. They also understand that we didn't always live up to those principles, and we're going to be unapologetic about telling that as well. And so, when parents say, well, we're not Christians, so we don't want our kids to understand the role the Bible played, we're not including the Bible to push a religion on kids. We're not including the Bible to say that your kid should be a Christian or push an evangelical position. What we're trying to do is give your kid an understanding of history in America, where America came from, what beliefs influenced those individuals, so that then they can understand American history. And again, if they can choose the path that they want for their lives, their beliefs, everything else, but you got to start with an understanding of history, number one. And number two, look, that's why we continue to, we want parents to have opt-outs. We want parents to be able to make those decisions. So, look, I think that's a bad decision on their part to exclude. I mean, I'm a history teacher. I always try to tell kids, believe me, I dealt with the question all the time of, well, this part's boring, right? You hear that all the time, or I don't care about this part. And I try to tell them, well, guys, but this is part of the bigger picture, right? You got to understand the full picture to appreciate all of history. So I say all that, and sorry for the long answer there, but I say all that to say, I think it's important. I wish they wouldn't do that. But again, we're going to continue to protect their ability to, they're the parent. If they want to do things like that, that's absolutely something we'll
This is an interesting point that was brought up a little bit ago from people in the legislature. They said that, like, if the president of St. Isidore getting publicly funded dollars and everything, so if they got money, why couldn't some of the private schools that are already in Oklahoma become a charter school and use public funded dollars? And they were worried about how much that would cost the state if this were to become a thing. Do you have any concern about that? I mean, obviously, this would set a precedent for the United States if it were overruled to make religious charter schools. So what about here in Oklahoma and private schools?
I really appreciate that question because I think we have to fundamentally view the way that we fund education differently. And I think we've taken steps in that direction. I think that a religious charter school would really help us get there. But we need to fund education like this. How much does it cost to educate Johnny, Susie, and Allison? Not, okay, what's the chunk of money are we going to give this public school or this charter school? No. Every child, how much does it cost to educate them? Let's allot those dollars as closely to that child as possible, and then allow the districts, the schools, the sites to make budgetary decisions based on that. The closer we get to schools making decisions, because Allison over here, we've got $14,000 to educate her. She probably needs A, B, and C. She may need a math tutor. She may need this type of curriculum. The closer we get to that, the better, because decisions are being made for the individual child. So that's my fundamental view, is I have no concerns about that, because I want us to continue to move to funding education, not based on a giant number on, well, we want to give them 100 million here or 100 million there. How much are we going to pay for every child? And then let those parents decide where those funds go. And again, I think it makes that budgetary decision-making at the district level so much better and so much efficient for the children.
Do you have a message, for the parents that enrolled their kids at St. Isidore or ultimately wanted to?
Yes, I do. I would tell them, we're going to keep fighting for you. We're going to keep fighting to get you that educational option that you choose. We're going to continue fighting for your religious freedom and your religious rights. And, don't give up. Keep fighting, and we're going to keep fighting for you here. And there's a lot of Oklahomans cheering for you. There's a lot of Oklahomans that want you to see that opportunity.
And with Oklahoma ranking 49 in education, would you say more strong virtual charter schools like St. Isidore would possibly be the answer to getting better and moving up in the ranks?
Absolutely. I mean, when I was elected, and when I went around the state, I heard the same thing from almost every Oklahoman. This isn't good enough. This education system isn't good enough. And so as I had these conversations, Oklahomans kept saying, well, what can we do differently? And these are things that we've got to continue to tackle. And that's where you've seen us be very aggressive on school choice, very aggressive on getting the teachers' unions out of school, very aggressive on our tutoring programs, very aggressive on merit pay, very aggressive on trying to take a system that wasn't working well and make it work better for kids. I believe that these type of schools help provide new options. And again, the thing that excited me about this one is to his point of the track record here. The Catholic Church is in a tremendous job in other settings. So if they enter into the virtual space, and as we know, there's a lot of parents that, the opinions are mixed, right? Some people love virtual options, some people hate them. But if there's somebody else who wants to take a crack at that and can do it differently and appeal to parents in a different way, I am on board with trying that, because again, I think we've got to continue to challenge the way we've done things to try to improve that ranking.
On the topic of, talking about funding schools and things like that, how would eliminating property taxes, which is the main mechanism for funding public schools, do anything to help funding schools?
Because it's got to be part of a broader conversation. And here's the broader conversation. How are we taxing our citizens, and how are we paying for government? Every state around us are eliminating massive amounts of taxation. We've got Texas has a zero income tax. We have Florida that not only has zero income tax, has started moving towards eliminating a property tax. These states look at different revenue streams and how they bring that into the state and look holistically about what impacts the taxpayers the harshest, and we're going to eliminate those things. And so when I look at it, I start here. What are the tax? When you tax something, it's like the Supreme Court said back in the 50s, power to tax is the power to destroy, okay? I don't want to destroy labor, so we shouldn't tax income because we want more income, and we shouldn't tax property because we want people to own their property. And again, I just use the analogy of when I buy a TV, microwave, whatever, I pay whatever I've got to pay for it. If you came back to me every year and said, well, you still got to pay a tax on it, well, do you ever really own it? I believe it's the same way with property. So there's a lot of revenue streams that we have. Those need to be eliminated. And again, we need to continue to cut government. Government needs to be cut. We continue to increase the government budget for government agencies. We continue to see this increase. We got President Trump up at the federal level, cuts billions of dollars in the federal government. And here we are in Oklahoma, every county voted for him, and we see an increased cost of agencies. So you cut spending dramatically, and then you come in here and say, listen, what are the taxes that are most impactful or harshest to families? We want to be a very pro-family state. And to me, families want to own their property. They want to be able to own a home. And I think that that's a big way in encouraging that and encouraging more folks to move to Oklahoma.
So where would the funding come from for public schools if that were eliminated?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of taxes that we pay already that, again, as you start looking at, and by the way, you look at this, of course, income tax is largely directly to the state, right? Property taxes largely directly into city and county governments. So you start going, well, what are we doing at the state level, which we should do to eliminate income taxes, is you got to dramatically downsize. It's the same way for city and county governments. We should dramatically downsize. And instead of paying for these massive amounts of individuals to work at the state, local, city levels, you start redirecting those funds to the things that you want, to the local schools, to an education system. And so, but again, it's comprehensive. You've got to reprioritize.
You talked about making an amendment to the state constitution. What specific change should be made?
Yeah, we should be crystal clear that funds can be spent for religious purposes. I mean, that's the thing that, again, I think it's pretty clear. But if we need to make it even more clear, I think that we need to do so. So again, if that's where we end up, and we can have an easier mechanism to be able to fund these options, and I think we should explore it. So again, I think that's where you would tackle it, is to just make it clear whether you don't have the local legal question. Again, I believe that right now our state constitution is obviously out of line with the U.S. Constitution. That's the argument here. So why wouldn't we go in and clean up the state constitution? And knowing that, why wouldn't we clean that up to make that more clearly aligned with the United States Constitution? So that would be the way I would kind of tackle that one.
If you continue, pushing, taking the legal fight on with this, and I don't know how much it's cost up to this point, but will it be worth that cost, that legal fight? I can't imagine that that's cheap.
Absolutely. I don't think you can put a price on religious liberty. So I think that we've got to continue to fight these things. And listen, that's a question we always hear when you tackle something, when it's the Supreme Court precedent. But I believe we've got to go back and challenge where the Supreme Court has got it wrong. I think we've got to go back and challenge when citizens' rights have been trampled, when they've been stepped on. And so I think this is an example of that, where we've got to continue to move forward till we correct that wrong. So we're going to continue to fight for religious liberty.
I know the Attorney General has come out today and said, well, hey, this is a win for religious liberty. So why is he wrong?
Well, taking away someone's ability to choose an option based on the religious beliefs of that option, I find it, I mean, he's stretching pretty good to try to turn that into a win for religious liberty. So look, I'll let the Attorney General, comments kind of speak for themselves. I think that's a ridiculous argument. But look, I think that you expand religious liberty. You make sure that someone isn't targeted because they are Christian and tell them they can't do something because they're Christian. I think that's the issue. And so, again, him and I, we're on opposite sides of this one.
Folks, we have time for 2 more questions.
So I've spoken with charter schools
Yeah.
advocates who are actually really concerned that if the court were to go in favor of St. Isidore, that it would kind of remove the reason for charter schools to be on state funding formulas. The main argument being
Right.
that if charter schools are not state actors, what are they doing on the funding formula? So can you kind of speak to that
Yeah.
argument, and why wouldn't that put charter schools in peril?
Well, I think that's a frustrating argument from charter schools because what we see here is, again, most charter school folks I talk to, they want more choice, they want more options. That's part of where they came from. So, when you see opportunities to expand choices and expand options, if we continue to fight for those things holistically, no one should be in danger, because we're going to sit here and say, okay, just like we're going to fight for the religious charter, we would fight for your charter. We would fight for these things to continue. So, frankly, I've heard it from blue states or from national entities that say, well, we're worried what this might mean in Wisconsin or what this might mean in, and I mean, my position on that is kind of what I said earlier. My concern is Oklahoma. I want Oklahomans to have every option. I want Oklahomans to have the best school system available. I want Oklahomans to be able to make these decisions. I'm not sitting around worried about, California, this might mess them up. I'm really not worried about that. I'm worried about Oklahoma. And so for those charters, I would say, look, we're going to continue to support options. We're going to continue to support you moving forward as long as you're doing a good job and helping kids. So to me, I wish they would look at it as an opportunity for more choice and more options.
So you said the 4-4 vote isn't a clear, defeat. So if another state were to challenge this and bring another case to the Supreme Court that's similar, would Oklahoma support them in a lawsuit?
Yes, no, good question. Yes, we would. I mean, if it's a similar situation, I mean, again, I need to see the specifics, but generally speaking, yes, we want to see this overturned. We want to see these options made available. Look, we're going to look internally and see what we can do here in Oklahoma, because we want this option available for our parents. But look, I think this is far from over. I think this is obviously not a good day on this front. Again, the losers were the families, were the parents that wanted these opportunities. But again, there's options moving forward. So, we are excited about that, and we're going to continue to fight.
If it from another state were a similar lawsuit, except instead of Catholic school, it were an Islamic school, would you support that lawsuit?
You're really wanting to get me on that one, aren't you? You're really wanting to get me on, answer that one. Look, in our state, it's very clear. In our state, the criteria have to be met for you to be a charter. I'm not going to speak outside of Oklahoma when, again, I've told you, some states have some bizarre rules. As we started looking at charter applications and what a charter entity could look like back before we even had the charter board, we went out to Arizona and looked around and looked at some other states, and we're going, that's kind of a weird thing that you make them do. And then it's kind of strange that you don't make them talk about academic quality. You don't make them talk about outcomes. You don't make them talk about a track record. So look, that would depend on the situation there of what state comes up with what. But here in Oklahoma, this has been the path. And again, they followed that path. So that's what we would support.
So back to the
Last
question,
question.
if it were a state that came up with an Islamic charter school, if that were the situation, would you support that?
Well, that wouldn't meet our criteria. So I'm going to support what would meet Oklahoma's criteria. Our criteria has been very, put together in a sense of, if you have that track record, if there's a history there, if you have that community support. And again, we haven't seen that here. So that's what I'd continue to support what would be helpful in Oklahoma. Thank you, folks. Thank you guys for making it over here today.